Hi, it's Greg again, talking about your writing practice. Well, mostly I'm going to talk about my writing practice. If you're new to this channel, I'm Greg. I write and self-publish fiction and nonfiction, and I use this space to share what has worked for me and what I've learned from what has not worked for me. This time I want to talk about point of view or perspective. This is mostly a fiction thing. Obviously, fiction and nonfiction has a lot of crossover and bleed over. I'm not going to try to separate that. But if you're a nonfiction writer, this may not be as much value to you. But if you're a fiction writer, yeah, you're going to want to know what your point of view is about point of view. So point of view is an important decision for a writer. And thankfully, there are tons of fun choices to make. In this video, I will hopefully make it easy to understand the different point of view choices and how to make the best one for your story. Spoiler alert, I'm going to recommend that you try different ones before you decide what the best one is. I will start by saying that I am not necessarily an expert in point of view, but I have written and rewritten my own work in different points of view and have enjoyed the heck out of how it changes the story. But to start, I want you to think literally of point of view as the eyes through which a story is witnessed and then told. I'm going to use the example of The Three Little Pigs, which is a children's story in which there are three pigs who try to escape a wolf by running to increasingly sturdy homes, first of straw, then of sticks, then of bricks. And I'll use that to illustrate point of view in the different examples. So from the source material, here's a few lines from The Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there was an old mother pig who didn't have enough food for her three little pigs, so she sent them out into the world to seek their fortunes. The first little pig was very lazy and built his house out of straw. The second little pig was somewhat lazy too, and he built his house out of sticks. The third little pig worked hard all day and built his house strongly with bricks. One day, a wolf happened to pass by the lane where the three little pigs lived, and he saw the straw house, and he smelled the pig inside. He thought the pig would make a mighty fine meal, and his mouth began to water. Okay, that's the gist of The Three Little Pig. If you've never heard this fairy tale before and you were shocked, I apologize. But yeah, that's how I grew up. All right. Three Little Pigs, by the way, is written in third-person omniscient. You'll learn more about that in a minute. But let's start with first person because it's called first person. This is a recognizable approach because the narrator's sentences will include I or my. This is a person telling a story that they are probably in some way. Maybe the main character, I think more commonly a side character. The first line, for example, in the classic novel Moby Dick is, "Call me Ishmael." Me. Okay? The first line in The Great Gatsby is, "In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since." Okay. Both of those classic uses of first-person point of view, and both narrators act as witness to the story and are also central to the story. Writing in first-person point of view is fun and weird. I definitely recommend trying it because you'll learn very different things about your story. There is an intimacy to first-person POV that brings interesting things up in the story. Let's imagine the three little pigs in the first person. First, from the perspective of the mother. Once upon a time, I was an old mother pig who didn't have enough food for my three little pigs, so I sent them out into the world to seek their fortunes. My first little pig was very lazy and built his house out of straw. My second little pig was somewhat lazy too, and he built his house out of sticks. My third little pig worked hard all day and built his house strongly with bricks. One day, a wolf happened to pass by the lane where the three little pigs lived, and he saw the straw house, and he smelled my piglet inside. He thought my pig would make a mighty fine meal, and his mouth began to water. Fun, right? First person from the point of view of the mother pig. I definitely think different things about her and the story in this POV. It would be really fun to do from the POV of the wolf as well. The last part would be, one day, I happened to pass by the lane where the three little pigs lived. I saw the straw house and smelled the pig inside. I thought that pig would make a mighty fine meal, and my mouth began to water. So again, there's an intimacy to first-person POV, and as a reader, it's not always clear how much we can trust that narrator. That's part of what makes writing in that point of view kind of fun. First person isn't really all that common. Absolutely fun to play with. I recommend it. Next, second person. Second person point of view is recognized by you and your in the text. In the writing, the narration directly addresses the reader as if we, are part of the story. It's quite a rare point of view, but if you want to find some books written in that point of view, you can do some internet searching. Fair warning, you're not going to find a lot. As with first person, there are some twists with second person. A novel I really loved is You by Carolyn Keynes or Kynes. One line from that book is, quote, "You walk into the bookstore and you keep your hand on the door to make sure it doesn't slam." Sounds a lot like second person because it's addressing you, but there is some really festive online discussion about whether this is really second person. Consensus seems to be that it's not, because the narrator, if it were really second person, would be speaking to the reader. In this case, this narrator is actually speaking to another character, although we are getting the story through the eyes and mouth of that narrator. The consensus is that that is first person in that novel. It's a really great novel, though, by the way. I'm not going to try to unpack that, but let's check in with our pigs in second person. Remember when you were an old mother pig who didn't have enough food for your 3 little pigs? You sent them out into the world to seek their fortunes. So that is second person, again, not very common, and there's twists there that make it difficult to separate whether the you and the your, the second person address, is going to another character, as in the novel I mentioned a moment ago, or if it's going to the reader, which technically makes it officially second person. You know, here's the thing too, don't get caught up in whether it's really truly second person or whether it's first person masquerading as, pick a point of view that serves your story. All right, third person. As you might imagine, if first person is I and second person is you, then third person is him or her or they. Third person point of view is super common, and I'm going to break it into its most common variants: third person omniscient and third person limited. Much of my own fiction writing has been in third person omniscient, although lately I've been converting it to third person limited, which I'm finding to be more fun. Here's an example of third person omniscient from a story you might recognize. Quote, "When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11st birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton." Now, we don't know who the narrator is, and as the story unfolds, that omniscient point of view allows the narrator to sort of fade into the background until we focus entirely on the characters and the story, which is what I think this author wanted. J.R.R. Tolkien, by the way, in case you didn't know, that is the first line or two from Fellowship of the Ring, first book in Lord of the Rings. As indicated by the label, the omniscient narrator knows everything about the story, including what's happening in different places, and more specifically, how each character thinks and feels. In comparison, third person limited still utilizes a narrator to describe things that are happening, but only including the internal thoughts and feelings of one character. The way I write third person limited is that my narrator can see anything that's happening, but only knows the thoughts and feelings of one character at a time. Famously, in A Song of Ice and Fire, from which the TV show Game of Thrones comes, George R.R. Martin writes always in third person limited. Each chapter is named for the character whose point of view we're going to hear. So in one of the early books, first book I think, the chapter was entitled Bran. Quote, "They set forth at daybreak to see a man beheaded, 20 in all, and Bran rode among them, nervous with excitement." So our narrator sees all 20 setting forth, but only has insight to Bran's nervousness and excitement. So the remainder of that chapter, again, comes from Bran's point of view entirely. So let's check in with our pigs, shall we? I mentioned already The 3 Little Pigs was originally written in third person omniscient, so let's see that again. Quote, "The first little pig was very lazy and built his house out of straw. The second little pig was somewhat lazy too when he built his house out of sticks." Now, lazy could be an observation, but I think it also captures the internal world of both these pigs. If I were rewriting this as third person limited, I might go with, "The first little pig was very lazy and built his house out of straw. The second little pig built his house out of sticks, which seemed to the first pig like the same kind of laziness." So it's a slight difference, but you see the difference there is the character I'm coming from is the first pig who is observing the second pig's house made out of sticks, but is inferring laziness from his own experience rather than stating it as a for sure thing. Okay. That is first, second, and third person. It is sometimes hard to know what the right perspective is for your story until you try out different ones. And as you can see from this video, I definitely recommend trying out different ones. So that's point of view, also sometimes called perspective. It gives you a couple ideas on what to try. I encourage you to try it out, and I hope you have fun with it.